Hey everybody, KC here. So I ended up having a really interesting branding conversation with my 26-year-old daughter over the weekend. And it sort of followed up on the FaceTime that I did on Friday that talked about whether or not Paramount Plus was a better branding name than CBS All Access. And it was interesting, we were sitting around in the kitchen and we were talking about the Sunday night interview that Oprah was doing with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And I said to my daughter at one point, I said, what time is that on even? And she went to look it up and saw that it was on from 8 to 10 on CBS. And she said something really interesting. She said, what's CBS? Which one is CBS? And I said, you don't know which one is CBS? Now, Mrs. Content Guy was sitting next to me and she said, well, do you know which one is NBC or ABC or Fox? She had absolutely no idea. She knew it was some number, but she didn't really know what number it was. And it ended up that all she really knew in terms of traditional television, that when you go in from channel 301 up, those were all movies. She could remember the channels that Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel used to be when she was growing up. For some reason, that stuck in her head. And she knew that she watched Hulu and the streaming services. And basically anything she wants to watch on network television, she just goes to Hulu the next day or a week later or whatever it happens to be. The fact of the matter is that traditional network brands mean absolutely nothing to her. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So then I asked her something else. I said, well, out of curiosity, what brands do matter to you? First one she came up with was Sephora. She said, Sephora matters. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it's not just the fact that Sephora has a private label, but it also curates brands that she finds to be valuable to her. So she trusts Sephora. She said Apple was a brand that she trusts. She said Sonos. She's really into music and sound, and she said Sonos is a name that I trust. And then she asked me a really interesting question. She said, is Taylor Swift a brand? And I had to think about that for a second. I was like, oh, gee, I'm not sure. She goes, because pretty much, if Taylor Swift says it, I tend to pay attention to it. And that could have to do with fashion. It could have to do with politics. Whatever happens to be, she finds Taylor Swift to be a real influencer in terms of how she thinks about things. She likes the way Taylor Swift presents herself and presents her ideas. And I was sort of saying, well, I'm not sure that Taylor Swift is a brand. And then she looked at me because she knows how to boom, right? And she goes, well, isn't Jimmy Buffett and Margaritaville a brand? And I had to say, yeah, that's absolutely true. And listen, I think that's really it's an interesting way to think about brands. And the fact of the matter is, young people think about brands in completely different ways than we probably think about brands. They have different criteria for what is a brand that matters and what is a brand that doesn't. And anybody listening to me now who has a brand, and in some way, almost all of you either have a brand or are working for a brand, I think you have to think about that. Does the next generation of consumers think about brands in completely different ways, and do they value different things about brands going forward than we think of customers traditionally thinking about brands? I think it's worth considering, especially as you figure out how you're going to lay out brand strategies and establish value propositions going forward. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this morning. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.